Hi everyone and welcome back to Creator in Conversation, the official podcast of TASQ Art. I am your host, Owen Macaulay. Since 2011, I've been making and publishing comics with Lightning Strike Comics, Ireland's largest independent comic book publishing label. Since February 2024, I founded Ireland's first academy dedicated entirely to comic book creation. That's sequential art, design and production, TASQ Art. This podcast is a way for me to connect you, the audience, to some of the interesting individuals I meet along the way, leading industry professionals, people who have amazing insight into the craft of comic book creation. They share their experiences, they share their insight, they share their passion above all else. Today's episode is with a new friend, Ben Dickson. I had the chance to meet Ben at the fantastic Malta Comic Con. Malta Comic Con has been very generous to invite me over a couple of times in the past, and in the last show last November 2024, myself and Ben were both guests and we were able to connect and just catch up. When I was putting together the lineup for what we were going to do for the next couple of episodes of Creating Conversation, I wanted to kind of make it an opportunity to reach out to some colleagues and acquaintances I've met on the convention circuit. Some of you who may be professionals yourself going around comic book conventions might realise you meet people, but then hectic schedules, deadlines, we're like trains in the night. We just miss each other and never have a chance to catch up. So I'm using the podcast as an excuse to reach out to some familiar faces. Ben was a great conversation because he was very candid and clear in providing his experience at the comic book convention circuit, like dealing with customers, sharing his craft, the type of dialogue that can take place. Often I find in my own personal and professional experiences, the comic book convention is the lifeblood for so many creators. You go to the show, you sell there, it's work, you're there to sell or perhaps promote something or perhaps to network or catch the eye of an editor to secure more published work, etc. But then sometimes, although with social media, that's your storefront, that's your professional calling card, who you are and what it is you have to offer. Actual experiences and trading war stories, as it were, is usually reserved for, like, say, the pub or something afterwards where creators might talk. But Ben posted something on Facebook and I thought, this is an interesting observation. And we kind of went into that in a little bit detail in today's podcast. Ben also has a great creator-owned book called Silent Horizon as well, and he's put me to shame as he's both writer and artist onto the book as well. And we're able to talk about that as well as some of his other projects and his love for history as he blends it into his comic book work as well, and his enjoyment as a teacher also. So thanks again to Ben for joining me for this episode, and everybody can sit back, relax and enjoy. Awesome. So welcome everyone to this episode of Creator in Conversation. Joining us today is Ben Dickson, who, do you get this, Ben, where people say Dickinson? Because I keep automatically by default. Yeah, I'm the same with Macaulay. Everyone adds the extra C to call me Macaulay, and it's just that extra letter automatically. But thanks so much for joining me today. We actually met each other at the amazing Malta Comic Con. It was just a show that happened, was it last November? November 24, was it?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it was an excellent show. Was that your first time doing Malta at the show, Ben?
No, it was my second time. First time had a blast. I absolutely loved it. Let the organisers know how much I loved the show and all that, and then they invited me back, which is fantastic. Exactly what you want, and had a great time again. So hopefully I'll get to go back again.
Brilliant. And so just to introduce, we were just saying just before we began, you do a couple of shows over the UK, you've done Malta, but as of yet, you've yet to come over to any of the Irish conventions here as well. So for some of our listeners, this might be the first time, introducing yourself to your work. So I suppose what would be the elevator pitch / secret origin for yourself, Ben, in that what was your breakthrough into comics? So first of all, what's your primary field within comics, and what was your origin then into comic production?
Well, I mean, I generally say that my USP is I kind of focus on history. Most of my comics are history based in some way, shape, or form. Not all of them. I've done a couple of science fiction ones, and like my most recent one is not history at all. But most of the stuff I do is either kind of based at some point, specific point in history, and I'm kind of trying to get in historical facts and interest things that interest me, or it's actually like 100% like dramatized. This is exactly what happened, or stuff like that. So I work in lots of different genres of story. I kind of jump around a lot, and that's quite deliberate because I often I'm like I write a comedy and then I'm like I want to write something really serious and dark, and then so I jump around from thing to thing. In terms of how I got into the industry, I don't know. I kind of don't even really consider myself quite in the industry. I don't know. I mean, I've not written for Marvel or 2000 AD or any of the kind of more big kind of industry names. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I've just been around for a while, and people started noticing me after a while, I suppose.
Well, that's very interesting with the equating to the Marvel and DC, because we've had a couple of previous speakers on the podcast from Paul Kupperberg, Elliot S. Magin, and I was basically just asking them, hey, what would it be like if you broke into comics today? And they were like completely different. A lot of them were like literally it's just because they lived in the vicinity of where like DC were making the books that they were able to walk in
Mm.
and get a job. Now the industry significantly has changed in light of the influence and the impact in cinema, because billion-dollar films, as at the time recording, um, it's very rare now for these franchises to actually reach the $1 billion investment that's being put into it. But the idea of working on these recognizable global IPs, they now have like Oscar winners working, like John Ridley working on Batman, for example.
Mm.
And it used to be working a comic, you might break into film or TV. Now it's like you have to break into those industries to break into comics. But the macroization of technology, that there's so many platforms now, from digital comics to digital self-publishing. Anyone who wants to make a comic, I feel now in the 21st century, in this day and age, can do it. But it's finding that audience. It used to be you went out looking for your audience, or the audience went out looking for content. Now you have to go out and find your audience. It's kind of role reversal. But
I, I don't know. I would challenge that a little bit, to be honest.
yeah,
So I would argue that, one of the joys of comics is that it's always been a case of you only need a pen and paper. That's all you need. And when I first started going to cons, and we're talking sort of late 90s, uh, I think 99 was my first con. That was still there was still a lot of people who were photocopying. Like the first comic I did actually was the artist sent because I wrote it and the artist sent me work, and I photocopied it, and I kind of printed out lettering and then cut it out and pasted it on and photocopied it, and that was how that comic was made. So like the idea of anyone can make a comic, I would argue has always been that way. But I would also, if I'm honest, argue the idea that you've got to go out and find your audience is still very much, that was the case back then as well. Um,
Mhm.
I would say, sorry, I've kind of gone off on one there, but
No, no, no. Keep going. It's a good. I'll go.
okay, I would say that what's perhaps changed in the time since the late 90s when I started going to cons and then started doing my comics was the field of what you might find at cons and what you might find, that's massively expanded, and it's broken off into these kind of little kind of mini kind of little world sub worlds. So you've got your kind of manga readers and artists, and you've got your kind of 2000 AD inspired creators, and you've got your American comics people, and then you've got your kind of indie, and you've got your people, and then you've got like the queer scene, which was not at all. I don't remember it being there at least in the 90s and 2000s, and that's in the UK conventions at least. That's actually quite a big thing now.
This is a quick side note. It's very interesting. We had Paul Levitz on,
Mm,
that episode will go out just before this, but he mentioned as well about the LGBTQA plus
yeah.
audience. And at the time when he was doing Legion, he was saying that there was an audience that, from that community, and he didn't realize why it would respond. And he was speaking to other queer members within the industry, and they were saying, "Oh, but it's because it's the future. Everything, like, there were people like of orange skin, of different species, all hanging out." And they said, "Well, this is kind of like the X-Men. They could see themselves in the story." So I think it may not be as overt now back then, but it was definitely, I think those readers, those communities,
Oh
definitely
yeah.
very much, yeah. Mhm.
Oh sure. No, I mean, they were definitely quick readers back then. Definitely. But it's just interesting to see how much more out, shall we say, that
Yeah.
community is when it comes to comics. And and that's, I think, obviously that's a really positive thing. But what I find interesting about the scene today is that it feels less integrated than it did. Particularly the show like MCM, which is the most recent one I've done, which is a great show. But you'll find manga fans who kind of literally won't look. I'm at some of the books I do because they don't look like manga. So that's something that I've noticed happening in the past few years. Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon, but I can't quite remember what the point of all this was.
No, no, it's brilliant onto that one. And with the manga approach, I was listening to Rob Liefeld has a podcast as well, and I was listening to an episode, and he was mentioning how he is doing manga editions of his book, which is kind of like black and white kind of speed lines, but he's trying to match that style aesthetic, because as you were saying, you go into a bookshop now, I think in the mid 2000s, like 2010s, height of the Marvel MCU, bookshops, shelves filled with graphic novels trades. Going now, it's definitely leaning more towards the manga style. Even DC have adapted to the compact version of the books to try and meet that audience.
Yeah.
Would you consider adapting like some of your scripts or stories for adaptation into that style, perhaps? Then, if you're seeing it, or do you think it would it affect you much as a writer if you were to try and write towards that in terms of your stories, or is it just whoever you collaborate with the artist? What's your collaboration process like when you approach an artist?
I guess I don't really think about it in the way of, I don't know. I suppose the short answer is yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But it's more like I'm not really interested, because one of the things when I was saying about these kind of segregated kind of communities within comics, segregated is too strong a word, but like these kind of little bubbles that sometimes
Different
don't,
tribes.
yeah, like different tribes don't necessarily cross over as much. And I've got, I'll read any of it, basically. I'm quite happy to read any of it, and so on. So yeah, sure, I would be very happy to write manga. I would love to, in fact. Yeah.
And with regards to the very first comic you did, the photocopy they all has that. That's how I started as well. Scholarship competition in school, and we didn't even have. I just used like ballpoint pens, office paper, photo, just whatever you get your hands on. But what
Yeah.
was the story about? What was that? A history story? Was that a science fiction story that you did?
That was a science fiction story called Real Time, and the artist actually was Boo Cook.
Oh, brilliant!
And
Yeah,
yeah, and that was set in the future where a I don't know, yeah, I suppose a terrorist was essentially it was a terrorist in Britain was going out committing acts of violence and filming himself whilst doing it, and broadcasting it, and that was the basic concept. And it wasn't very good, in my opinion. Now, like looking at it now, no, I mean, I think it's not great. I think that Boo's artwork still holds up, but I wouldn't be surprised if Boo disagrees with that, because that's what we do, don't we? Like we criticize some early work.
That is literally the cost of the creator,
Yeah.
never satisfied with your own work.
Yeah.
Even, and if you are in the moment and you look back at it in the future, it's like, nah, nah, nah. But it's good. It shows growth. It shows change. Obviously, if we were to stay the same as artists and writers our entire careers, that would be that would be no change whatsoever. There'd be no progress. So, at the moment, what are you working on? Ben, you have at Malta, you had a couple of titles, and you've just done a few shows as well. So, currently, what's available off your work?
Well, I mean, this podcast is quite well timed because I've literally just set up a shop
Oh,
online.
brilliant!
So people can have a look. What's not so great is that I haven't worked out international postage yet.
Hmm.
So if people who are not based in the UK would like to, which is most of the audience of this, I assume, would would like to get any of my stuff, please do message me on my website, and I'll work something out. But yeah, it is international is coming. I just haven't figured it out yet. But to answer your question, so this is the brand new one. Now, basically, one of the things that started happening is that I've started self-publishing a lot at the moment
Hmm.
because I found that in the last kind of few 2 3 years, well, since the pandemic, really, actually,
Hmm.
I found it increasingly harder and harder to get publishers interested in stuff. And I know I'm not the only one finding that. Um, so yeah, I in the last year or so, I've been like, well, I'm just going to self-publish, take this thing to shows, and then I've got more kind of concrete evidence that I can show to publishers, and they can take it if they want, and if they don't, well, I've got the book.
Hmm.
So anyway, this is the most recent one. I'm holding this up to a camera because on camera, I assume most people are not going to be seeing this on camera. But basically, the latest one is a 160 page A4, like large format graphic novel called Silent Horizon, and that is actually not history. That is about an island community. It doesn't say exactly where, but it's off the coast of the British Isles somewhere. And it's about um, what happens on that island when essentially the world ceases to exist, and no one, and the island is still there. People on there are still there, and nobody knows what's happened or why. All they know is that every night there's a glowing light in the sky that's getting brighter every night, and they don't know why.
That's great, and that sounds like the type of story as well that would really do well in adapted form as well, like as a film on the screen. When you're writing, do you ever keep in the back of your mind this could have the potential to be adapted into another medium, or is it purely, do you deal with the project purely as the comic?
I would say I deal with it purely as the comic, but I do occasionally think, this would work well as a movie, or this would
Yeah.
work well as an audio drama or whatever. It's I mean, I've got no, I mean, I love movies, so I would be delighted if one of my things got adapted into a movie. It's not happened yet, and I'm not kind of holding my breath. But yeah, I mean, I don't think about it like I'm writing this as a thing that should be adapted into a movie, because I think if we do that, we're doing a disservice to the medium. We're doing a
Mhm.
disservice to graphic novels. So no, my first focus is making sure it works as a comic, and there are very talented filmmakers out there. I'm sure they can figure out a way to adapt it if that's what they want to do. Um,
No,
so
brilliant.
yeah.
Because it does seem to strike me that there's an emerging of like two branches among comic writers, of those who definitely have the mindset on the development of an IP that could be used across, transmedia platforms is what they
Mm.
used to call it, multimedia and such. And then, as you pointed out as well, I think Alan Moore perhaps is perhaps most famous or infamous for it, which is like the
Yeah.
non-adaptation of the material, like it's written and created particularly for the form. And I suppose one of the main questions that I hear coming back to me in conversations with other creators is, first, before you go to make a comic, you got to ask yourself, why does this deserve to be a comic as well? Like, why isn't it film, a novel, an audio thing as well. It's just interesting. It seems to be two branches to it. The first who are writing for the wider. This is going to be going into the Hollywood engine or game development or whatever, and the others who are like, as you were saying, focusing onto the craft, the medium itself. Who was your collaborator on that book?
No one. I illustrated that one
Oh,
myself.
you illustrated it in itself. Amazing.
Yeah.
And do you always illustrating as well as writing alongside your work onto it? Was that something you came into, or you did from the beginning?
I did it from the beginning, but I didn't have great confidence in what I was doing. So it took me a while to kind of build the confidence and just say, no, I'm just going to do this myself. So I did a book which came out in 2018 called A New Jerusalem, which is set in Bristol in 1945, and it's about a boy whose father comes home from the Second World War, and it's about the impact that he has on his community. It's kind of the idea of that book was to do a comic book in the style of Ken Loach. So I wanted to do a book that was kind of social realist, that was about very ordinary lives, and set against this, enormous event, and how it impacted the lives of normal people. And I kind of, when I developed it really quickly and I wrote it really quickly, but I realized that I I had to draw it myself.
Okay.
There wasn't a choice in my mind. It was like, I can't actually give this to anybody else, because the the feeling of it and the pacing and stuff would be the thing that actually carried the story. It's not just the plot and the characters. There was something indefinable about the mood that I couldn't communicate. I was worried I wouldn't be able to communicate with someone else. So I realized that the only solution to make that story work was to actually do it myself. And so I did, and I did lots of photo reference of friends and places and stuff like that, and used that as a way of doing it. Um, and photo reference has its shortcomings, like quite significant shortcomings. If you're very heavily referencing that stuff, it kind of limits you in some ways, but it also frees you in other ways and gives you lots of ideas and stuff that you might not have come up with. Um, so yeah, so that one was illustrated by myself, and then when I was finishing that, I'd already had the idea for Silent Horizon. I think I might even have already written it, and I decided, and I'd kind of given it to an illustrator who then decided they didn't have the time, and then I gave it to someone else who then decided they didn't have the time, and then I was like, oh, I'm just going to do this one as well. And this one had to be in color, and I knew, like, there's an element of the story where basically part of the story is told through the color scheme. Um, so that one had to be in color, and so I had to figure out how to make that work. And like my degree was in fine art painting, and I've always had this, I dream of doing a fully painted graphic novel, and I was like, well, now's the time. So I used a program called Rebel, which ELLE, which is a kind of a program designed to replicate various types of paint. And I used the photo reference model again. Um, and yeah, and it's taken me 5 years.
What's the name of that title? What's the name of that title?
Island Horizon, that's the most
Oh,
recent.
that's Silent Horizon as well. Is
Yeah,
the same one. Sorry, apologies. So that's good. And it's 5 years in
5 years.
development,
Yeah,
and
so
it's coming out now on your online store, is it?
yes, so it's available now on my online store. It's going to be coming out in French
Oh, brilliant.
at some point, probably next year. I don't know exactly when yet. Um, but that's coming out through Actors Sud. Those guys, they do really, really good stuff.
And how did you make the acquaintance? Or was it through, do you have representation, or did they find you at a convention, or did you reach out?
So they, well, the sorry, New Jerusalem came out through Myriad Editions and New Internationalists. They'd kind of bonded, joined forces at that point. and I think it was I'm not actually sure. I think it was Corinne Perlman who runs Myriad Editions, because she goes to uh, Angoulême quite often, and I assume she knew these guys. So basically, they sold the French rights, the rights to the French edition to Actes Sud, and yeah, it came out in France in January 2020.
Oh, oh well.
So it had about 5 weeks in shops before the entire world shut down. So, which had something of an impact on the sales.
Yeah, this is it. It's so funny. Before lockdown, I remember avidly saying to David, like, no, web comics don't really ever, be the same as printed comics because the collector's mentality, the production of it, etc. The moment lockdown happened, I just
Mhm.
embraced digital comics like you wouldn't believe. But
Yeah.
everyone kind of had that recalibration moment, I think, with COVID. How have you found it post? Well, I'm not going to say post because obviously it's still, COVID's still
No,
around to an extent.
post
But
lockdown.
yeah, post lockdown exactly. So how have you found the most seismic changes, I suppose, for you, going to conventions, publishing, pre and post lockdown?
I think the difference has been the greater difficulty in getting interest from publishers.
Okay.
That's been the biggest thing, I think. I think uh, I think that, combined with a few other factors, means that a lot of publishers kind of lowered their lowered their publishing list. I think a lot of
Hmm.
them were at that time, perhaps. I mean, it might have changed in the last year or two, but I think a lot of publishers were essentially clearing their list of things that they commissioned, but hadn't been able to publish. And
Hmm.
so I think that caused a huge effect. It was certainly interesting going to conventions with everyone masked up. Um,
Yeah.
but in terms of conventions, I think everything's pretty much back to normal, to be honest.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, again, the biggest difference for me is I've just started self publishing, basically, or just in earnest, and I'm just like, I'll self publish and then I'll look for a
W-
publisher.
Would you like to see that develop further into more of like an independent publishing venture for yourself? Because that's more or less what you're
Mm.
currently doing. Do you see like you might expand that or hope to develop the business side in the future?
I haven't really thought about it yet, if I'm honest, because
Hmm.
basically, I can't remember if I told you about this in Malta, but when I saw you in Malta, I'd pretty much like not long got back from traveling, because I'd gone traveling for nearly a year, and just taken time out. And it was one of the things I decided when I was away was I can't be bothered to wait. I just got to have these books in my hand, take them to conventions and just sell them and see what happens. Um, and it has been really interesting because uh, did I? Yeah, I would have had a copy of my book Chamberlain.
Yep. Yep,
Yeah.
that would have been there for sure. And you had an interesting, I think, experience at a recent convention I was
Mm.
seeing on, because we're Facebook friends. It's interesting that Malta, Facebook still seems to be the main social media platform, which is amazing because it's such a small island. I think everyone still uses it. But after Malta Comic Con, it's not unusual for everyone to become Facebook friends. And I seen you
Mm.
share an interesting interaction with a customer. I thought that was great
Yeah.
for a couple of reasons because I don't think people share enough of that kind of maybe occasional pub talk, but I always appreciate the candor of somebody because
Mm.
this is our profession, this is our career, like this is what we're doing, and those type of insights can really help because I've had shows where you're just being down and out. It's very demoralizing.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
bad run in with like one person came up to me, bought a comic one year, next year came up to me, said the lettering was too small. The book they got last year, so they looked at my other stuff and said, I'm not going to get these. Didn't even like pick it up, said one bad experience. And I was like, okay,
Mhm.
you got to learn from that though as well. That's not, they're not blameless in the opinion there. But for you, it was I think it was the depiction and it came about like Chamberlain wasn't as, Oh no, sorry, am I mixing up with Churchill? Is it? Was it
No, no,
the?
you're right. It was about Chamberlain. So just to give context for your listeners, so the graphic novel in question is called Chamberlain, and it's a dramatization of the origins of the Second World War, from 1937 to 39, told from the point of view of the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. He was, of course, famous for holding up, the famous piece of paper signed by him and Hitler, and saying, a faraway country of people we know nothing, and all of that. And that's all in the book, and it's basically an explanation of who he was and why he did what he did. And some people have described it as a rehabilitation. I wouldn't go that far personally, but it is certainly an attempt to drag him out from under the bus, shall we say?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's a more level approach. And the thing is, it's sold really well at conventions. It's a really, like, it's my biggest seller at conventions, or one of my biggest sellers anyway. So it's doing really well, and I'm quite surprised at how well it's doing. But I guess it's got a certain recognition. But anyway, yeah, the story you're referring to. So yeah, at MCM, a woman bought a copy of Chamberlain and a copy of Silent Horizon, and came back the next day to say that she didn't understand them. And it was, I wouldn't say it's exactly a complaint, but it kind of felt like a complaint. So she was saying that Chamberlain wasn't heroic enough or something, and like, she was saying that he was in this position to be this hero, but he wasn't, and he didn't understand his motivation. He didn't understand this, that, and the other. And I tried to kind of give a bit of an explanation that it's not supposed to be a heroic portrayal. It's supposed to be an exploration of him, and kind of it's the idea of what makes a man of peace declare war, because that's what ultimately happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then she complained about Silent Horizon, saying it condemned all of humanity, and she was saying that the two books seem to be saying complete opposite things. And yeah, so
Well, that's an interesting comment to say.
yeah,
Like, it's like, well, you should be only a one-trick pony, only saying the one.
yeah, I think she was expecting, because again, she was complaining that the main character in Silent Horizon had the opportunity to be heroic and then didn't take it. And I was like, well, no, again, that's kind of part of the character. I mean, yeah, I'm really interested in this idea of nuanced character study. I'm less interested in this idea of good and evil, and that yeah, that's not very interesting to me. So I want characters that are deeply flawed, that are don't do the right thing necessarily, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the things that fascinated me about Chamberlain. So anyway, yeah, that was a very interesting run in. Yeah, I think that's the only real situation where I've had that happen. And she did walk away satisfied in the end, I think, because I did kind of explain how it
It,
worked.
that is the magic, if I call it that, of like conventions where you really do in real time get to engage with your audience. Like, if you're an actor on the screen, you hear about reviews on. I know social media, it's more direct and accessible, but really flesh and blood person. Even if you go to an actor on the stage, sometimes you might see them afterwards for a signing or something, leaving the dressing room, but you don't really sit down and analyze or dissect or express how you feel about the work in that level of detail. But at a convention, that's it. And I suppose that's comics is by nature are collaborative, though, in its production and in the engagement with the audience. And even then, you have your fellow, attendees or exhibitors like at Malta and such, where we'll be hanging out at pubs and all afterwards and comparing war stories. But no, it's just been. I appreciate the insight and discussion about it, because it's tricky, I think, with convention. Personally speaking, if you go and you have like a down and out experience, there's one convention, I remember, and it was like catastrophic. No, maybe two, but they were just catastrophic for me. But you can't really go on, I find, at the same time and express that because you have the business end as well, you know.
Do you mean like no one bought your stuff,
Oh
or...
yeah, yeah. There's been a couple where the shows themselves had poor turnouts, so that's
Mm.
already kind of and fair enough. But that even if that's something beyond my control, you hope a show promoter might be able to give, and sometimes beyond their control as well.
Yeah.
There's this, you know, or some you go to a good show, you did brilliant last year, you put all your eggs in that basket of, oh yeah, I'll do the same next year, and you don't.
Yeah.
It's there's a great fertility, I think, with comics. But what's really piqued my interest in the last while, I see with the fantastic downtotubes.com with John Freeman, he seems to be really pushing about the UK government seems to be heavily investing in getting behind comic production at the moment, recognising the comic book industry, and more so because since Dundee, with, you know, going back to the Beano and the Dandy and everything, there's always been a strong UK comics manufacturing presence. But have you been engaged or any that coming across your table yet of any of these new initiatives or programs?
I'm aware of them, certainly. I mean, I have friends who are engaged, who are involved in, doing a lot of this stuff, and building a lot of this, and yeah, it's absolutely tremendous what they're doing, and yeah, very much called for. So it's fantastic that they're engaging with it, and it's also great that the UK government are acknowledging that this is actually a thing that they should be getting behind. Um, I think in the UK, I mean, I think I think this is true in many countries, but I think in the UK particularly, I can't speak for other countries, but um, I think that comics are very they're kind of, a lot of people regard them as something that other people do. You know, like everyone knows what a comic is, but not many people actually read them. And I think a lot of people would feel embarrassed to sit on a train or in a bar or whatever and read a comic in a way that they wouldn't if they were sat reading a book.
Mhm.
Um, and there's quite a strong cultural embarrassment about them in a way. There are
Mhm.
certain advantages to that, because you can kind of get away with a lot of stuff if they're considered an outsider medium.
Mhm.
There's definitely an advantage to that. But when it comes down to it, you want people to read them because you want people to buy them and you want to get paid. you know, uh, there was someone on Facebook actually complaining about how comics shouldn't be supported by the UK government. They should be kind of, their own industry insider thing, and that and it's like there was like strong gatekeeping. So there is a certain resistance to this.
It's an
Um,
interesting stance there because, like every other industry, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, they're like, okay, let them get the big tax breaks or government support, but comics, no, we'll stand on our own.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, there's so much good that comes from comics. Like, you may know this already about there was a, a a report that was published in the UK about children's reading habits, and they found that
Oh yeah.
only 30% of children read for pleasure. Um, and there was a massive outcry in the book industry, like, pessimistic kind of, oh, we're it's all doom and gloom. And buried in that exact same report was a caveat that this did not apply to comics readers, that in fact the numbers would double in that those kids who read comics, 60% of them read for pleasure. And so that was not reported or like anywhere outside of the comics kind of press.
Shortly thereafter, I noticed the UK government investing more within the comics scene. So I wonder if there's some behind the scenes
I
stuff
wonder.
there. But because I remember again, Down the Tubes covered that, and they kind of shined light on it. Some Rich Johnson over on Bleeding Cool kind of
Yeah.
shone a light on it as well. And then shortly thereafter, suddenly there's more talk about investing into it. And yeah, no, there's a lot more that government organizations could do to help the medium, and it's all gain to them because at the moment if you think about it, I know the UK have had like 2000 AD, and like they
Mm.
really, have some stellar comics there for decades.
Yeah,
But don't forget about the British invasion to the US and all, like all the best talent they had, like all the
yeah,
leading creators. What did they do? They went to America, and America kind of had like this monopoly for so long, arguably because they've no mythology, because it's still a very young nation if you count like, Americans today are descended from the settlers and plantations and stuff, but the actual, they don't go all the way back to like how you would have King Arthur, I would have Cuchulainn, they wouldn't have that, so they invent Superman.
mm,
So
mm,
maybe that's the appeal to it. But I feel like some of the initials, like this is stuff they could have easily done in the early 2000s or mid
mm,
2000s. Your comments on the age stigma, very interesting. It's something which definitely uh I noticed pre-Evan growing up, but like when I was in secondary school and such, that would be something I would be privy to. Now I do see a shift to the mainstream. I do think cinema and the MCU have helped, erode some of the stigma. Spent a decade teaching animation. We covered the age ghetto, which is animations
mm,
just intended for children. Post World War II, after the bomb, obviously in the East, devastation all around. They looked for escapism, entertainment wherever they could find it. So the comic book, the manga, the different approach. You could read it on the train, no one would back the eye to you because
yeah.
they just saw it as a medium, much more
That,
disposable
that's
entertainment
still
as well.
true.
Sorry? Yeah, it
Sorry,
is, yeah.
that's still true. Yeah, like in Japan, you will see little old ladies reading manga on the train. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very
it's
common.
amazing. The one good thing I think that with digital comics is people probably like, I think people are still shy, at least of a certain generation. I would say from the 30-year-old bracket upwards might be
Mm,
still, shy about breaking out,
mm,
a comic or a trade. But they'd probably be the same ones reading on the laptop or the
mm.
computer or the tablet. So I think the digital have kind of given a peace of mind that it's them and the screen to one extent. So yeah, it's just been interesting. What would be among some of the biggest change? You said your first convention probably around 97. You've gone
Yeah,
through pandemics now. You've done a bit of traveling. You've done shows at home and abroad.
yeah.
Is there any real milestones that are standing out to you now at the moment as, oh, this is a big seismic change?
In terms of conventions, okay. Well, from '99, there was one convention in the UK, just one,
Okay.
um, and that was the same. That lasted that way until maybe 2006, I think. And Shane Chebsey started up a second one, which is in Birmingham, I think. The first one was in Bristol. Um, uh, so yeah, there was one in Birmingham, and one in Bristol, and then they gradually started to balloon, and then now there's one almost literally every week. In the UK somewhere. So the proliferation of them has massively changed. The Many of them are not really about comics.
Hmm.
So MCM is a good example of that, where it's primarily, fan culture, and comics are a part of that. And comics are a welcome part of that, but it's not why most of the people are there. Um, so uh, yeah, so that's been a big change. Like, what does a comic convention actually mean?
Hmm.
The meaning of the word has changed. Um, I would say the demographic has changed in a very positive way. And so certainly, like, it's not that you wouldn't see women or people of color, or whoever.
Hmm.
Um, you would see vast majority like white males, like, oh, like, like many kind of middle aged and so on. No problem with that, but yeah, like, there wasn't a lot of diversity. And now I would say certainly if you go to MCM and you look at the artist alley, um, the diversity is right there. And if you go to Thought Bubble today, I think I don't know what the figures are, but it's certainly a lot more representative than it ever used to be. So that's a major change. Um, that's not to say that it's perfect, but
It's
it's
an
not
ongoing
going.
process, as they
Yeah,
say.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, in terms of demographic representation, I think there's still a little, it's not 100% representative, but that's the way these things are. And it's, you can't, it's a lot better than it was. So that's a major change. And the other major change I would say is just in terms of printing quality, because I'm printing 170-page graphic novels like perfect bound, which you could not do in the 90s. It just wasn't. It was prohibitive. You couldn't do it.
Mhm. If
So
you could do that then, if you go in a time machine and bring back one of those printers, which you'd be a millionaire by today, you know?
they'd be doing well. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think there were a few. Like when I started, there were quite a few like anthologies. So this is things like the Accent UK guys were doing stuff. There was Future Quake.
Yep.
There was like Judge Dredd fanzines, stuff like that. And they were really good places where you could just start. Like you could just get experience as a writer. It's unbelievably difficult to convince anyone to draw your work, especially if you've never done it before. So that was a place where you could actually do it. So you could submit a script, you could write a script, and just you go to them and say, "I'd love to write a script for you." You don't get paid, obviously, but it you do get published. And it's a really that was a really good experience. So I did a few of those.
It's
And I don't
it,
know if they're still out there. I don't know if those things are still around.
well, it's funny because oh, in 2011 I started a small publishing group called Light and Stray Comics,
Mm.
and it's been in print since 2012. And now at the moment, this is the first time we've brought it back in years. We've brought out volume 10 of the anthology. Now, when it began, it's exactly as you described it. We were just a bunch of collaborators. I think we're all unemployed writers and artists at the time. No one was getting paid. The book did turn some small money, but we just put it back into print production. However, it led to paid work where I ended up, making video game adaptations, how I ended up getting my career as a teacher and others. I've recently brought it back and tied it in with the academy, so we can use it as a platform to publish students, but we also invite back some of our other collaborators who used it as the portfolio to work for Marvel, DC and others. And we also opened up for people. And what we do is, I can't afford to pay a decent industry page rate, but I can give the same deal as Image, which is you will own everything and we'll print non-exclusive. So we will give a print fee, which is even more than what Image will do. They'll print it, but they won't pay you. But we will print it and pay you something like in terms of a fee, so you can be paid published work. And for the very reason that some of our students are writers, and it's impossible, like legally, editors can't even read your stuff. If it's a published story that's already done, it's easier. But how do you get that and that collaboration? The reason for the break with Lightning Strike for so long was some people were taking advantage of the system to an extent where they were getting like artists to do a lot for them, but it wasn't like reciprocal and like the benefit to the artist. So that's why I had to reevaluate. But I think here there've been a couple of anthologies. That's probably perhaps one of the biggest differences down at the moment between Irish and UK. I think with technology of printing, you were saying people can go off now more individually, do their own print run, self-contained. But there are the limit break guys who have anthologies on Kickstarters and stuff at the moment. There's a great crowd in Cork that do it ourselves, Light and Strike. But we're so small. Like if the UK scene is, small in comparison, imagine what the Irish scene would be. But I hope that's a bit of a renaissance. Would that be something you would like to see do more of, anthologies in the future? Would you enjoy that? Are you happy working on your own projects?
I would definitely not rule out doing like short stories in anthologies. It kind of depends on what it is. Um, but I would certainly love to see more of those things printed because they were always fun. I mean, the Accent UK ones, especially. I don't know if you ever saw those. They're probably like we're talking like 20 years ago now, but yeah, like they did a zombies anthology which sold loads, and they did a robots anthology follow up which sold loads, and had stories in both of those. Um, and yeah, they were really fun. So like I remember Leah Moore and John Reppion were in
Oh
those.
yeah.
David Hitchcock was in it, and yeah, like anyway, quite a few like quite well known figures were in those. Um, yeah, I mean it would be good to see them. I'm actually going to. I'm in an anthology which is coming out at some point. I don't know when.
Oh great.
Yeah, it's there's it's called Rejected, and it's a kind of it's an anthology of rejected 2000 AD future shock scripts.
Okay. I like that concept. That's very good.
It's a great idea, but it's like it's the ones that were rejected but are actually readable. You know? Which, like, actually, a lot of them are not very readable, but yeah, the ones that are actually, not so bad, but got rejected anyway. I guess I don't know. You'd have to. I don't know what the selection process was, so I don't know how I got chosen. But anyway, yeah, I'm in that one. Um,
Brilliant. No, that's good. Who's putting that out?
I can't remember off the top of my head. Is it Bard and James Melanie? I can't. Yeah, I think that's the guy that's doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to. Yeah, I'd have to check because it's been a while since that's kind of an ongoing kind of fit it around my day job kind of deal. I think.
What's the day job for yourself as well?
Oh,
You're in the teaching
no,
field as well.
I am. Yeah. No, I mean for him, I think it is. But no, for me, yeah, this is very much a fit it around my day job kind of thing. Because I know a lot of your students and stuff from your academy, I guess, might be listening to this, so it might be quite interesting for them to hear about this because a lot of your focus would, I imagine, be about like finding paid work
Mhm.
in the industry, and I'm not doing this for a living. I'm making some money, but I'm not making anywhere near enough to get to live. So
Mhm.
um, and I kind of stopped trying quite a while ago now, and it's a case of if it happens that would be great, but I'm not actively kind of knocking on DC's door saying can I write Batman or whatever, you know. So and what that does is that it frees me up to write what I want uh,
Mhm.
and not what will pay me. Um, because I do know writers who make a living from writing who love what they do, but are also frustrated that that they're playing with someone else's characters. They're playing with an established property that they don't own. And
Yeah.
if at any point um, the property owner decides, okay, we want another writer now, that's it. You're done, and that's the life of a freelancer. Whereas what I'm doing, the Chamberlain book, for example, okay, that's done. It's mine. It's what I wanted to do, and that's going to be on my table for as long as I want it to be. You know,
Yep.
and yeah, and I kind of you have a sense of pride and a sense of ownership over these things that I think perhaps you might not have as much if if you're writing issue 379 of an established property. But no, to answer your question, I'm an ESOL teacher, which is English speakers of other languages. So I teach migrants and refugees language and culture.
And how have you been finding it? Are you enjoying the work, finding it rewarding being the teacher?
Yeah, I like being a teacher. It's good, and I meet people from all over the world, and they're fascinating people, really interesting people, and yeah, often with fascinating and sometimes heartbreaking backstories.
Mm.
Um, yeah, yeah, it's the kind of job where um, you're making a difference very, very directly to someone's life because you're essentially enabling them to live the rest of their lives and get over the things that happen to them and force them to leave their own countries.
That is the great gift of being a teacher is the impact you leave on others.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I swore after my final exams as a student, like I never want to do an exam again, never want to work for deadlines, get into publishing, get into teaching where it's nothing but deadlines. And then I said I never be a teacher, and then you end up with it. But like as you were saying, like the economy and the system today, it's very rare to have just one single stream, like the jobs of our parents and grandparents, where you're like, well, this is me now until retirement and I get to go and watch. It's like it's a gig economy.
Yeah.
Even Scott Snyder gave an interesting posting there a few, I think months ago now, but he was saying it was so long for him, even when he thought it was economically viable to make comic book writing a full-time job, there was always that concern coming transitioning from freelancing, and he was already teaching that it took a while even to accept when he had like the biggest selling book to go, okay, maybe it's okay to go pure comics. And at the moment then, so you have Chamberlain, you have Silent Horizon as well, and anything else that to give a shout out that folks want to check out your work where they can begin, or anything else that they might be able to find available?
Sure. Well, the easiest one to find at the moment, because it's not self-published, is called The Queen's Favorite Witch. So that is spelt with the American spelling. So that's without the U, favorite without the U. And that is published by Paper Cuts in the US. And books 1 and 2 are available now. Book 3 is coming out in September. And that's with Rachel Smith, the artist.
Very good.
And that is about a girl who becomes the royal witch for Queen Elizabeth I. And it's a children's adventure story. It's sort of like, I don't know, like 7 years and up, or 8. Like
and
that.
This is historically accurate as well, isn't it?
Well, it's probably more historically accurate than you might think, but it's I mean, it's obviously a fantasy, but it has a lot of historical elements to it, and part of it is about kind of sneaking history in through the back door, which is one of the things I love about Asterix. Is that you learn from that there's a place called Gaul, and that like you learn about the Romans and all this sort of stuff. And as a kid, like that's how I learned about all that stuff. And so that's part of the idea in this, is that like at that time, witchcraft was just accepted. It was just a thing. It wasn't good or bad. It was just a thing. And it was really after Elizabeth's time when James the First or Sixth, depending on your point of view, came to the throne and essentially got rid of all of this. So there's historical characters in it. Like book 2 is all about the King of Spain, and book 3 is about a witch trial, and it has features the ghost of Thomas Cromwell is a guest character in book 3. John Dee is a recurring character in the series. It is kind of deliberately sneaking history in through the back door, that series, and it's tremendous fun to write as well. And the other thing I'll say about it is that I'm also sneaking the Welsh language into because it's an American book, and I'd imagine most Americans wouldn't know what the Welsh language looks like or sounds like. So basically, and I love the Welsh language. I don't speak it, I'm afraid, but I lived in Wales for 5 years, and I genuinely love the sound of it. And I wanted to put basically magic spells in books, and various other things are often in Latin, which I'm not sure it makes a hell of a lot of sense. In like Rivers of London, they have a really good explanation of that. That it's basically, you don't speak Latin every day, therefore you're not likely to accidentally do a magic charm or whatever. But I wanted to have a magical language, so all the spells are written in Welsh, and they're kind of spoken like long sentences in Welsh. And one of the great things about that is I didn't tell anybody. Basically, I didn't tell anyone that it was Welsh. It doesn't say in the book anywhere. The guy that helped me translate is listed as divine language consultant. So basically, if a child thinks, I wonder if that said anything, happens to look put up Google Translate and hold the phone over the page, it will translate the spell into English.
Welsh, a magical language.
Yeah.
Did you put that in the tourist guide? No, listen, this has been brilliant, Ben. It's fantastic to be able to get caught back up. I've been reaching out to a few others from Malta Comic Con as well, because I've been fortunate to go a couple of times like yourself now, and I always think it's nice that when you go to these events to be able to network and keep in touch with people, and hopefully this is the first of many conversations to come as well. Before we break off, thank you once more for your time, but you mentioned people can find you online on your website. Can you give out that website for everyone at the moment?
Yeah, it's bendickson.co.uk. So that's Ben, Ben, Dickson, Dickson.co.uk. And as I say, I've just put a shop up there. At the moment, the postage ordering and everything is UK only, but I do hope to sort that out fairly soon. But at the moment, you can message me on the website if you want to buy any of the things on there and you're not in the UK. Please do message me, and we'll sort out the postage for you, and then go from there.
And tell Ben you heard about it on this podcast, and he'll cut me in for 10%.
We'll talk about
that. No, this has been brilliant. Best of luck with everything ahead. Do keep in touch. You were saying you never made to an Irish show, so hopefully we can figure something out in the future as well, and talk again soon.
Cheers. Take care.
Thanks again to Ben for joining us for this episode of Creator and Conversation. It was a pleasure to catch up, and I hope we have more conversations like this in the future. Thanks again to you for listening. If you can, please consider liking and subscribing. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Audible. Basically search for us on your podcast platform, your favorite podcast platform, and if you can't find us, feel free to reach out and let us know. You can email us at info@TASQart, that's TASQART.com, and we'll be happy to look into expanding into new platforms as well. If you have a comment or a question, feel free to comment on the podcast stream as well, or to reach out to me directly at info@TASQart.com. Quick reminder as well that we have the upcoming Frank Miller Masterclass happening on August the 11th. Limited tickets are available at this time of recording. Be sure to check our social media for the latest updates as well. Until next time, this has been a copyright production of Macaulay Consultancy 2025.